At the age of 7, a girl went to heaven 'cause she got shot when the drive-by happened. And at the age of 8, a girl got raped, but she act like everything's okay. And at the age of 9, a boy cut lines on both of his arms 'cause he wants to die. And this is no lie, this is real life. We need our world to change, 'cause kids are dying every day, and mothers are crying every day. We need our world to change.
That was We Need Our World to Change by Brian Lewis. Welcome to the Rise Weekly Review for February 14th through February 21st, 2022. A shooting in East Chicago left a man dead and a woman injured. According to reports, 30-year-old Robert A. Sylvester from Calumet City and a 28-year-old Chicago woman were shot on the 4900 block of Homerly Avenue Wednesday night. Police responding to a ShotSpotter alert of 13 rounds fired found Sylvester dead in a vehicle and the woman wounded. The woman, who has only been identified as his girlfriend, was taken to St. Catherine's Hospital with a gunshot wound to the face. She was last listed in serious but stable condition. Anyone with information can call Detective Isaac Washington at 219-391-8318 or leave an anonymous tip at 219-391-8500. A 39-year-old man was shot in South Shore on Sunday. Around noon, the man was pulling into a driveway on the 2700 block of East 75th Street, about a block down from Excel Academy. According to reports, someone walked up to him and began firing shots. The man was struck in an undisclosed location. He was taken to the University of Chicago and last listed in fair condition. Anyone with information on this or other Chicago crimes can contact 311 or leave an anonymous tip at cpdtip.com. On Saturday, a crash in South Chicago left 5 people injured, including an 11-year-old girl. The crash occurred around 5:45 p.m. on 92nd and Houston between 3 vehicles. A Jeep was traveling westbound on 92nd when it was struck by a Ford heading southbound in Houston. After being struck, the Jeep then struck a Chevy. The 11-year-old girl was in one of the vehicles and was taken to Comer Children's Hospital in fair to serious condition. 3 of the wounded were taken to Trinity Hospital. A 20 and 21-year-old were reported in fair to serious condition, and a 50-year-old was in fair condition. Another woman, aged 44, was taken to the University of Chicago Hospital and last reported in fair to serious condition. Another identified person involved in the crash refused medical treatment. The Sun-Times reports that no citations were issued for the crash. A Metra Electric armed robbery leads to the arrest of a man in Calumet City. The robbery occurred on Tuesday around 2 p.m. as the Metra Electric arrived at the Van Buren station. According to reports, as the train arrived, a passenger pulled out a handgun and announced the robbery. The man forced the conductor to hand over cash before fleeing the station. The Metra Electric connects commuters from stops in between South Chicago, Blue Island, and Richton Park to downtown Chicago. Investigators determined that the man originally boarded the train at 147th Street at the 147th Street station in Harvey. On Wednesday, a man suspected of the crime, who has not yet been publicly identified, was taken into custody in Calumet City. In a statement, Metro Police thanked the public for assistance in identifying and arresting the man. In other news, a father charged with the beating death of a 2-year-old in Lansing was acquitted during the week. Jeremiah Thompson was found not guilty despite what Lansing police claim was overwhelming evidence against him. In 2014, Thompson, who was 21 at the time, was charged after 2-year-old Jakaria Patterson was found beaten to death inside a Lansing home. Police claim Thompson, who was previously investigated by DCFS for abuse, had given a videotaped confession admitting to abusing Jakaria. Investigators claim Jakaria was beaten to death because she wasn't potty trained and had a dirty diaper. Prosecutors alleged that Thompson struck Patterson, causing her to fall and strike her head on the toilet and floor. He then allegedly forced her to sit in her own waist and continued to strike her multiple times in the back and stomach. An autopsy determined Patterson died of multiple blunt force injuries from child abuse and ruled the death a homicide. Thompson, who was on parole for robbery at the time, was held without bail for 8 years before the trial concluded in Markham on Monday with 4 not guilty verdicts issued by the jury. The Lansing police chief was brought to tears by the decision, claiming the evidence showed it was a slam-dunk case.
There was truly, really no defense. Our detectives did everything by the book.
No. This case, the state's attorney did a very good job putting this case together. From my understanding is that, like the chief said before, it's a slam-dunk case.
Jakaria's family was outraged by the decision and has vowed to continue to fight for justice.
I have no clue what they thought, what they woke up, what was their argument or what was in their mind frame to think that he was not guilty. He completely confessed to it.
I'd just like to say that the people that served on that jury, I hope you sleep good at night. I really do, because you made a big mistake.
Although once a not guilty verdict is reached in a criminal case, there are only civil options with financial penalties available. No statement has been released by Thompson's attorney. During the week, tensions were high between environmental activists and employees of Reserve Management Group as the city of Chicago set a final meeting and deadline for its decision on a permit for an East Side metal shredder. The city had stated in its final announcement that a decision for the controversial metal shredder would come following a public meeting that was set to be held on Tuesday. At the meeting, the city of Chicago held its final presentation on its health impact analysis. The city examined 3 areas they considered either most impacted or most involved in the campaign around the facility. These included East Side, South Deering, and Hegewisch. While the East Side in general had less actual health risks than Hegewisch and South Deering, indicators aside from cancer were between 50 to 75% above what other city norms are. The city discussed how the EPA findings show that the area has been experiencing improvements over the last 10 years in terms of air quality and health risks. They also presented results of an air quality index that attempted to identify areas in the city that are more vulnerable to effects of pollution. Their analysis suggested that South Deering and northern parts of the east side were more vulnerable than areas in the southern east side and in Hegewisch, where the proposed facility would be built. This was followed by a presentation from a Tetra Tech consultant. The consultant claimed their analysis included examining the impact of all facilities operated at the site, future sites, assuming 24-hour resident occupation, sensitive locations such as churches, schools, and parks, along with potential exposure. According to the assessment, risks and hazards for residential areas and sensitive locations were well below EPA benchmarks for both carcinogenic risk and non-carcinogenic acute and chronic hazards. The city then provided an analysis of quality of life findings related to the site. In its analysis, the city claimed the site would provide negative impacts in terms of traffic, noise, concentration of industry, explosions, water pollution, soil pollution, and air pollution. Positive impacts would be realized through additional jobs and increasing the city's recycling capacity. However, the number of new jobs identified would just be 35, as a majority of workers would just be retained from existing RMG employees. The city findings also suggested there would be no real, non-cancerous health and carcinogenic risks. However, the city claimed the site's building would present mental health risks, particularly from disorder or feelings of powerlessness from the site being built despite protests. The city concluded its presentation with possible mitigation efforts. Further things, such as compliance, the city would include in its analysis and a Q&A session. Concerns raised during the meeting seemed to center on the work of Tetra Tech and how it came to its conclusions. Among concerns raised were the lack of analysis on the impact of RMG combined with other area industry, potential lack of data from insufficient monitoring, not evaluating the site as a toxic hazard site, and possible issues with what was being evaluated. The consultant attempted to justify their work before the meeting was finally ended. Following the presentation, environmental activists prepared an additional protest for Friday and claimed the city analysis was unfair. From social media posts, it seemed as if there was a belief the city would allow the permit. However, on Friday, the city announced that it would not move forward on the permit decision. The city claimed that RMG had shown a history of problematic compliance and that it had not demonstrated that it would operate under the strict compliance needed for the site, particularly because of risk from pollution and health to the surrounding vulnerable population. In response to the decision, RMG claimed the decision was political and stated they will be challenging the decision, including continuing its legal efforts, and seemed to imply they would be seeking compensation from the city in a civil case filing. On Tuesday, members of the U.S. Steelworkers rallied outside of the BP refinery in Whiting. Union members were rallying as a part of a nationwide demonstration for a contract with Marathon Petroleum. Marathon Petroleum is negotiating its deal as part of an attempted framework on which other oil industry contracts will be based. The Northwest Indiana Times reports that the union has been negotiating with Marathon for a new contract that would cover wages, benefits, workplace safety, and working conditions. The negotiations include discussions on ensuring 100 years of collective bargaining agreements would remain in place if a refinery is sold, and issues around the occupational death benefit. The union wants additional benefits included in the agreement, including updated health holiday, pay for workers in evening shifts, and a full-time environmental representative to help ensure union jobs as the company enacts decarbonization plans. However, USW had rejected the latest offer, and Marathon claims that would be its last. In Whiting, BP has proposed that the union concede to giving it 120 days notice before a strike and require workers to train their replacements. USW 71, which represents the Whiting BP, has been preparing in case of a strike. And finally, downtown Hammond will get an exhibit by the Hammond Development Corporation in honor of Black History Month. The Hammond Development Corporation is a business incubator located at 5233 Holman Avenue. The incubator includes an art gallery called the Creative Hub, where local artists can showcase their work. Curated by former street artist, muralist, and East Chicago native Felix Maldonado Jr., the exhibit will include his works along with those of artists Tyrell Anderson, Jeffrey Black, Laron MC, N. Emma, Erica Garcia, Joe Heredia, Lisa Jones, Eddie Kay, Nick Pelot, and Tiffany Yorick. The opening reception will take place from 5 to 8 p.m. on Friday. For more information, contact Jackie DeRosa at 219-803-6304 or email jackie@hdcnwi.org. And that ends our weekly review for February 14th through February 21st, 2022. Thank you for joining us for this week in review. Peace.
Kids been dying from 16 to the age of 5, and I've been trying to take these thoughts up out my mind. Yes, I've been fighting for peace and joy inside my life, but how can I when there are homicides? Oh, she said goodbye when a car drove by. She flew on high on the swings one night. She left her mom all by herself. She left her dad paying. He had fell. He went to heaven from a Smith and Wesson. He disappeared when a drive-by happened. Homicides, yeah, homicides. They happen every day. They're digging these kids brand new graves.